greetings everyone. On behalf of Friday Waters, an initiative of the W4W Foundation, a think tank built as Citizens Collective, we welcome you to today's session of Friday Waters. Friday Waters is a continuation of signature series Wednesdays for Water. Each of the Friday Water sessions, which includes Water Talkies, Water Reading Club, Water Thesis Club, Water Arts, and Meet a Maestro. Each of them happens once a month depending on the availability of our speakers. The Friday Water sessions are designed to be fun-filled and yet be fruitful, and to understand how water can be looked through other ways than the scientific way people talk about it. And other ways are equally scientific, but then there are softer ways we consider. Water art session and Meet a Maestro are actually clubbed together today as we have a special guest and start of the year. So then I also wish to say New Year greetings to all of you with this session, and we have no one other than Devdutt Pattanaik to share his insights on mythology of water since Harappan times. I met him recently actually in Kerala in the Manorama Lit Festival, and I could convince him to join us. So thank you so much, Devdutt, for accepting my request and also helping us start the new year with such a wonderful session, as well as we are also celebrating 300 plus sessions at W4W. We have completed 320 sessions by 2024, making us the longest water conversation as of now. So before I invite him to give his presentation, it's my honor to give a short introduction, though he doesn't need an introduction, but for our record and on going for live. Let me just introduce him. Devdutt Pattanaik is a much sought after speaker and culture consultant who uses mythology as a toolkit to make sense of work, life, business, and entrepreneurship. He has written over 50 books on the relevance of Indian and world mythology in modern times. He has written over 1,000 newspaper columns that appear regularly in reputed English and Hindi journals. His TV shows Business Sutra and Devlok have been seen as path-breaking. He single-handedly has mainstreamed mythology in India over the last 30 years. He writes on relevance of mythology in modern times, especially in areas of management, governance, and leadership. He defines mythology as cultural truths revealed through stories, symbols, and rituals. More about his experience, of course, can be found through his website, and when we are going to have the conversation, and especially today we have requested him to talk about the water matters, and that too from the Harappan time and its relevance today. Over to you, Devdutt, and thank you so much once again, and New Year greetings, and accepting our invitation to really speak on this platform. You will really motivate us to start this new year with a big bang.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mansee. Am I audible? Is it clear?
You are audible, loud and clear. Thank you.
So, whenever I begin a talk, I try to explain the definition of mythology and how it is different, because it is a word over which people have many opinions but no clarity. So, mythology deals with subjective truth of a people. So the key word over here is subjective truth. It is not objective. And therefore, the world of science focuses on objectivity, on mathematics, on measurement, on evidence, and it is literal. So that's the thing about science. It's very literal, it's mathematical, it's measurement orientation, it's evidence-based. It is very skeptical. And otherwise, without verifiability and falsifiability, you cannot have science. Mythology is the very opposite. It is based on faith. It is based on metaphors. It is based on language. It is not literal. To see mythology literally is to destroy it. It is using a lot of symbols. It is using a lot of metaphors to communicate the emotions and the imagination of a people. And that's an important point to remember. So when we speak about mythology, we're talking about the emotions and the imagination of people. And when we're talking about water mythology, then we're talking about how people imagined water. What role did it play in expressing their emotions, their dilemmas, their issues, how did they use water? And that's an important thing to understand. Now, in India, all stories in India begin with the Harappan times. This is a large civilization spread across, the Indus River Valley and extending right up to Haryana, Rajasthan, Gujarat, and now we find this spread right across, divided by this unfortunate border, but across India and Pakistan, and the major sites being in Pakistan. But now we are finding large sites in Kutch, in Gujarat, in Rajasthan, in Haryana. And we really don't know much about Harappan mythology. I recently wrote a book, and that's how I met Mansee. I wrote a book called on Harappan mythology because I wanted to understand, everybody's obsessed with its architecture and its art, but I'm asking, what did these people imagine the world to be? And my conclusion, based on many of the things, and of course it's not it's a speculation based on my understanding of mythology, is that these are people who were mercantile people, and they had perhaps controlled by a monastic lifestyle. Mercantilism and monastic lifestyle usually go hand in hand in India. The Jains, for example, have always been part, they're a monastic religion, but they've always been part of the business community. The Buddhists, we know them as venerating monks and monasteries and building monasteries, but all these monasteries were always built on trade routes. And you find with Harappan cities is that they are obsessed, there is a obsession with measurement, and their obsession with calculation, with proportions, and these are indicators of a mercantile people who trade a lot. We know that they traded lapis lazuli from as far as Afghanistan and took it down the river of the Indus to the Gujarat coast, to the Makran coast, to the Persian Gulf, to Oman, and then to Mesopotamia. And therefore, it is what is called a fluvial civilization. The most ancient civilizations in the world were linked with water, with river, and with the sea. So fluvial is civilizations which are not just the river, but the rivers which open into the delta and get into the sea. And whether it is Egypt, so Egypt was a river that flows northwards. The Nile River flows northwards towards the Mediterranean Sea, and therefore the water is important. The fresh water of the river Nile and the salt water of the Mediterranean. If you go to Mesopotamia, you have Mesopotamia means the land between two rivers, which in India is called Doab, Doab, between two rivers. And this is the civilization. The rivers flow and come down to a delta and connect with the Persian Gulf. Again, the freshwater river, which flows down the mountains, the Zagros mountains, they come down and they connect with the sea. The same thing is found in Harappa. You have the great river Indus flowing down from the Himalayas, the five rivers joining to form one big river, and its delta opening up into the Arabian Sea. Again, the fresh water and the salt water connecting. There is, of course, the famous river Saraswati that people talk about. We know this because archaeologists found a bunch of Harappan settlements in the middle of the desert called Cholistan. This could not have existed if there was no river in that area. And now we know that around 4,000, 5,000 years ago, there was some kind of a river flowing over here enough to create these cities. However, this river died out and the people started migrating northwards and westwards towards what is now Rakhigadi. Whether they call this river Saraswati or not can be argued forever. Nobody knows because we don't know the language, or we have not understood the script of the Harappa is more emoji like and is not phonetic, not sound based. It is more image based and emoji like. So we don't really know what they spoke. Did they call it Saraswati? We don't know. But the point is, water played a very important role in these ancient civilizations. They are called also hydraulic civilizations because they built canals. They are associated with rivers, canals. The Harappans, I don't think were linked with canals, but we know that the cities were built on the floodplains and they were built on large platforms so that the water, when it gets flooded, would not enter the cities. So they were actually built on large brick platforms and the water never entered these cities. They were made of burnt brick. So they really knew how to manage these floods. We know that cities like Mohenjo-daro had many wells, so they understood about groundwater. One of the peculiar features of Rajasthan is that it is one of the most densely populated desert. The Thar Desert is the most densely populated desert because there is a lot of groundwater. And this has led to the mythology of the underground river Saraswati, or this underground river which flows. And therefore, the story of Saraswati is found in these desert areas of India, of a river which flows underground. And it is just because this Thar desert, unlike the Sahara desert, has a lot of groundwater, and people have always found many ways in which to harvest this water, pull this water out, and use it even for agriculture, for herding activities, and for survival of many communities in the desert regions. So that has to be kept in mind. What is unique about Harappa is, yes, it has a river. Yes, it is connected to the sea. Yes, it has underground river or underground waters that we are familiar with this region. But the fourth point, and which is far more significant, which makes Harappa different from Egyptian civilization and Mesopotamian civilization, is the monsoon. It received rains from the monsoon winds. The rains would come from the southeastern direction. They would come in the around June, and the monsoon winds would bring rains and cause a flooding in the lower part of the Sindh area, in the Sindh right up to Punjab. And even in the northern area, there were the westerlies, which would cause in winter a lot of snow. So this was a land which was rich with water. There is snow storms happening in the north. There is the monsoon rain happening in the summer in the south. There is the river which is snow fed. There is also rain fed rivers. There is, and the strange thing is it is desert like. Sindh is desert like. Rajasthan is desert like. Very different from the Gangetic plain, which is rich and fertile and green. In fact, one of the reasons why Haryana is called Haryana, one of the theses is because it comes from the word Haryali. Because when people would enter India, it is at Haryana they would realize if you move towards the western part, you will come towards a dry Marubhumi of Rajasthan. But if you move towards the east, you will come to a green, rich land of Ganga, of Yamuna, of the Bengal Delta, the Angavanga regions. And that is the region, the wealth of India that was sought after by the people who invaded the land. And one has to understand this geography in order to understand the mythologies that emerge from this land. Once you understand the geography, you start understanding the mythologies. As far as Harappa region is concerned, we don't know what gods they worshipped. They definitely venerated trees. They definitely venerated the goats. Animals. They venerated holy men. They had these powerful women who are half tigers. So we have these images of powerful people, but specifically related to water is something that we do not know. So specifically related to water in Harappa, if there were gods, they definitely would have been the wells that were sacred, the canals that were sacred. Water was important because they have an obsession with bathing areas. They have an obsession with, we call, I always tell people, people know the Harappan toilets more than Harappan trade. And they are obsessed with sanitation. They are obsessed with rainwater drains to prevent so the most of the gutters were for rainwater management. In Dholavira, which is in the middle of a very dry area, they have these vast stone step wells, the first step wells ever built. But perhaps in Dholavira, 4,500 years ago, you have this step well cut into the rock. So it's quite amazing, this feature. If you go to Dholavira, is a little difficult to travel. It's full of, it's made of stones. It's not made of bricks. If you go to Lothal, which is more towards Ahmedabad, Ahmedabad, Surat, that area, you will notice that you will find these wonderful drainage pipes were very well organized. So water management was very important. And all the civilization, water management was important. For example, in Mesopotamia, the god Enki was linked to to the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. If you see the images of Enki, the Mesopotamian god of Sumerian god, he is shown with two rivers flowing into his shoulders. So the river is flowing into his shoulders. Some say the river is flowing out of his shoulders with the fish traveling upwards. And the fish is traveling upwards, which indicates the salmon fish which moves against the water. And the salmon fish is also there in the Indus River. And if you know the Sindhi god Jhulelal, Jhulelal is shown sitting on a fish, and that fish is the salmon. The Hilsa fish of Bengal is also sacred because it is the salmon. It flows against the current, and in all cultures, a fish which flows against the current is always considered auspicious because it stands up, goes against the current. So going against the current. Remember the Mughals, who were Muslims and therefore avoided iconography but had roots in the Mongol Empire. Their symbol was the fish because the fish symbolized freedom. You cannot tame a fish. You can't domesticate a fish. It is a symbol of, therefore, it was a symbol of royal power, sovereignty. Fish was always important. Even the Jains had two fish was always worshipped. The two fish was always worshipped. You'll find fish-like symbols in the Harappan script emoji. And now there's a recently a paper that has been published which says that these these fish-like symbols represented the beads that were traded by Harappa to all the way all the way to Babylon. So that is what these beads were, these fish-like symbols. And have you seen a fish eye? The fish eye is round with a round eye. And if you look at the symbols for Nazar, which is found in Turkey, the Nazar emoji, if it is there, if you look in your phone also, you'll find the Nazar emoji. You can do it right now and check. It is like a fish eye, and the fish eye, if you see, circular, and the emoji has blue color too. It's turquoise blue, lapis lazuli blue, then it is white and black. And these materials have been found, exactly the same sign is found on the head of the famous priest king of Harappa and on his shoulders, like a tabij on his shoulders and on his head. And people have said it is a third eye, but in all probability, it is a nazar battu to remove the evil eye. Remember, in traditional society, evil was associated with dryness and drought, and water and marshy land and clay and bogs and chickle, what is called chickle, that marshy, dirty, fertile land was considered to be auspicious. It was considered shubha. So kardama means something which is a sticky soil. Chikkala is considered to be, chikkal, which is called, is considered to be very sacred, a mixture of water and soil. And wherever water was there, it was considered auspicious. Now, the fish eye, when you see a fish eye, it is always open, it's always linked with water, it is always linked with movement, and therefore was considered to be auspicious. The opposite of dryness, the opposite of something which is bereft of fertility. So even today, 4,500 years ago, in places like Turkey and as far as India, this concept of nazar and nazar ka tika becomes very important. It's a black dot. So a dot is put, which is the fish eye. And the fish eye is something that has to be remembered in the fish emoji, which is used in Harappa. Like this, you can find these little, but of course, these are all speculative. Remember, mythology is primarily speculative. Moving on from the Harappan side, let's go towards the Vedic period. In the Vedic period, we do find river Saraswati becoming important. The land is called Sapta Sindhu. In the Avesta, it is called Hapta Hindu, or the land of 7 rivers. This whole idea of Sindhu giving rise to Indu, giving rise to India, It's all river based. The name India is based on rivers. So rivers were always important. It is so important that if you look carefully at the earliest temples of India, which started being built around 300 AD, the old temples which are found in central India around Madhya Pradesh, in and around Madhya Pradesh, you find these very, very old temples carved beautifully. And in these image temples, 300 AD, the temples, you will find at the door of the temple two women, one standing on a makara or a river dolphin, another standing on a turtle. The one standing on the river dolphin is holding a pot. She's called Ganga. The one who's standing on a turtle is called Yamuna. She also holds a pot. And therefore, if you enter the temple, you're effectively entering between Ganga and Yamuna. You're entering the land of the Doab. And on top of the temple is the mountain from where this river is flowing, which is Himalaya, which is really the region of Uttarakhand. So you see a shift from the Indus River to the Gangetic River in this design, the sheer design of Ganga and Yamuna and the mountain. And that is how Hindu temples were originally built. They were replicating the sacred land of Himalayas and the Ganga, Yamuna, Doab, and the invisible river which is under the ground, which is Saraswati, which is and you access Saraswati through a well or through tanks or through step wells. So anything which is obtained from a pond, or you'll say there's an underwater source, it would be called Saraswati. This was also called a Nag. In Kashmir, my friend from Kashmir has, she's from, her family's from Kashmir, and she said water bodies have always been called Nag. And I found it very interesting because in Persia, in Shahnama, there is a very nasty guy who is said to have two snakes coming out of his shoulder. So it is nags coming out of his shoulder, and that image of this negative character is very similar to Enki of Mesopotamian, but instead of two snakes or two nags coming, you have two rivers coming. And therefore you see the connection between Mesopotamia, Persia, Kashmir, Central Asia, this whole idea of connecting snakes, rivers. And Enki, by the way, is also the lord of fresh waters. And the word for fresh water in Sumeria was Abzu or Apsa, which is exactly the word which is used in Sanskrit for water. From that comes the word Apsara. Apsara is the lady of the waters. And incidentally, so Apsara, fresh water, the word Apsa comes from Mesopotamia. Arabia, we have heard of the word Arabia, the land of the desert. Ara in Sanskrit is called, also means a desert. So Apsa means water. Ara, and therefore Rajasthan ka Ra. I mean, these are all speculative. You have to find more to the etymologists who will explain, but I find these connections very interesting. Water, dryness. It is important to understand these symbols, and I'm just jumping from topic to topic. But water is such a wide subject. Across the world, you have symbols. Even Islamic traditions, which usually avoid symbolism too much, are rich with the concept of the prophet Khizr, or the green prophet who rides on a fish and brings fertility to the desert. The green prophet of Islamic lore. These are folk traditions, and is always seen as in the middle of the desert, he'll be found riding a fish. And that symbol of the man riding a fish in the middle of the desert is something startling, and you can imagine it's happening in the desert. Or you have in the earliest images of goddesses in India come from Buddhist sites. And Buddhist sites were trading communities, but they worshipped Lakshmi. The Buddhist Lakshmi has two arms, the Hindu Lakshmi has four arms, but both the Lakshmis are always associated with a water body. How do you know? Because there are lotus flowers and there are waterfowls. So the geese, the stork, then there'll be fish, there'll be the turtle. These are auspicious symbols, therefore. The lotus, the turtle, the water dolphin, snakes in the river with water supply. And they are pouring water on Lakshmi. again symbol of the rain and therefore fertility. So water is represented by the elephant, water is represented by the turtle, water is represented by the waterfowl, the duck, the goose, the swan, the crane. You have the image of the conch shell. So Vishnu holds a conch shell in his hand, again a water symbol. The famous Shaligram stones that Vaishnavas worship is linked to the ammonite fossil. Ammonite was a sea creature, but at one time, when all the mountains were under the sea, these fossils are found. So, in the mountains of the Himalayas and the sub Himalayan regions, you find ammonite fossils, again water symbol, which is still considered auspicious. So suddenly you find this water symbol. As I said, there cannot be a civilization without water, and therefore water is the central theme in mythologies. When the Brahmins started migrating from North India to South India, roughly 2000 years ago, this migration began. How do we know this? Again, mythology tells us stories of how Brahmins would travel from North India to South India. The most important Brahmin here is Agastya Muni, and he carries a water pot. He carries Ganga water from the north to the south, and wherever drops of this water fall, rivers form, which is why rivers like Godavari, Krishna, Kaveri are all called Dakshin Ganga, the southern Ganga. Agastya is also said to have drunk the ocean's water completely, drying it completely, and then urinating it out, which is why they say the sea water is salty. A very disturbing story, but it is mythology, and you must take it with the metaphorical meaning that the sea is connected with Agastya, the rivers are connected with Agastya. Agastya Muni, therefore, plays an important role in this water mythologies coming. There is one interesting story. We have heard of how Ganga comes from the heavens. So the Milky Way is considered the river, and Ganga comes from the heaven and is trapped in the dreadlocks of Shiva's hair and flows out. This story is well known. So Ganga is linked with Shiva. Yamuna is linked with Vishnu, and they say Vishnu's brother Balarama, with his plow, pulls the river Yamuna towards him so that he can take a bath. He wants to take a bath. Yamuna says, "Come to me to take a bath." He says, "I will not come to you, you come to me." They have a fight. Finally, gets so irritated, he takes his plow and pulls her towards him. And that is how canal irrigation is said to have begun. That's so then you have Yamuna linked with Vishnu, with Balaram, Krishna. Yamuna's the stories of Kalia Nag again in the Yamuna is important. And then Saraswati story is, I want to tell you a story which is not commonly known from the Saraswati Mahatmya, which is found in the Rajasthan, Gujarat area, which is about 1,000 years old, this story. And they say that when the gods had once asked a sage called Dadichi to hide their weapons, and Dadichi had pulverized their weapons and had drunk it and had consumed it, and the weapons had hidden in his bones. So when the gods came back and they asked for their weapons, Dadichi gave them his bones. He killed himself and told, "Use my bones to make your weapons." Now, Dadichi's son Pippalad felt the gods had murdered his father, and in rage, he produced a fire, a terrible fire, which he said, "I will destroy Swarga." The gods begged him for mercy, and we are told that the fire then, it was agreed that the fire would turn into a horse called Vadavagini, and it had to be hidden under the sea. And they asked the river Saraswati to lead this horse to the bottom of the sea. So she did the needful, but in the process evaporated and disappeared in the dry Marubhumi. She went underground. The fire horse or Vadavagni went under the sea, and it is said to live there even today, and is the source of all volcanoes, and is the reason why mists appear. So the mist appears because of the Vadavagini's heat. This is the horse that will rise, and Kalki is supposed to ride this horse, and therefore Kalki is supposed to come and destroy Swarga. at the end of time. The fire horse. It's not a horse, but a mare. The mare of doom. So these are stories which you find. I can go on and on telling stories. I'll tell two, three more, and then maybe we can go to a question answer session. In Buddhist mythology too, as I said, water plays a very important role. The goddess of the sea, as I said, the Buddhist merchants would travel over the sea, and they traveled across the sea to Thailand, to Cambodia, and they believed the goddess of the sea was Mani Meghalai. So Mani Meghalai is the goddess of the sea. And not much is known about the goddess, but she exists. The sea goddess is very, very important. They say that at Kanyakumari and along the coast of India, you will find many goddess temples like the Sikotara Devi in Gujarat, which is linked to the Socotra island near Yemen. And in these mount temples were always found on mountain tops. They would light lamps, which served as the original lighthouses for traders coming from Arabia. So Sikotra Devi is also called Vahanavati. So that is the way it works. You have the story of the white elephant in the Jataka tales. Wherever the white elephant is there, the rains will come. Wherever the white elephant goes, the rains will go. And this whole idea of a person who rainmaker, white elephant. So the white elephant was linked to um, Indra because it was the rain making elephant. And therefore, Indra became associated with the rain. Remember, Vedic Indra had no such role. The Vedic Indra was this fighter of course, this monster called Vritra, and we assume that it is related to release of waters. And then we try to connect the Vedic Indra with the Puranic Indra, but the Vedic Indra rode chariots pulled by horses and oxen. There is no connection with elephants. Elephants came much later in the Puranic tradition as the Aryas moved towards the rich Gangetic plains where the elephants and iron was found. So elephant stories really come from the Gangetic plain far more. The Harappa has one image of the elephant, and we are not sure whether the elephants were domesticated or just hunted for their ivory. Um, the story of Ganga is Yamuna, Saraswati are all there. Jain story about water is important to remember. We have heard of how King Sagar's son dug the earth looking for a horse, and they dug such a big pit looking for the horse, the sacrificial horse that had been stolen, that the pit became the river, became the ocean Sagar. The story comes from the Ramayana, but in the Jain tradition, it is told that the sons were digging a moat around Mount Kailas, and while they were digging a moat, they dug so deep that water started going into Nagalok. Again, Nag is coming over there. The Nags got very upset and they released their venom and killed the sons of Sagar. Sagar then apologized and asked his son Bhagirath to build a canal to connect the water to the sea, and that is how they say Ganga emerged. So the Jain story of the origin of the Ganga is very different from the of um, Hindu story of Ganga. So these are the very many stories that we have. I have tried to tell you stories. One more interesting thing you would like to know is about this whole idea of dipping in the river to purify ourselves. We really don't know where this practice originated because it's not a Vedic practice of dipping in the water. Fire worship was central to the Brahmanas. This whole idea of going to a tirtha and dipping in the water and coming out and purifying yourself, and we really don't know where it is coming from. But as I said, there are many things that Indians were trading with Sumeria. And in the Mesopotamian region, even today, there is a Gnostic cult known as the Mandaeans. And the Mandaeans are obsessed with bathing in flowing water to purify themselves and release their souls. Of course, they have no connection with India. They believe in this whole idea of John the Baptist, who is in flowing water, who who baptizes Jesus Christ in the river Jordan is supposed to have been a Mandaean. And there is some believe that this ritual practice of purification traveled with Jains and traveled with these merchants and may have influenced Indian beliefs about purification, but only Indian purification was more symbolic and related to karmic purification and not purification of the flesh. So as I said, there are many, many stories that we can say, but I would now like to keep question answer sessions. So you can ask me and we can take it from there.
Thank you so much, Devdutt. Actually, I was feeling that you should please continue and we can listen to, you just reminded me of my childhood time when grandparents used to tell us these wonderful stories and we used to break our head to understand these relationships. But of course, now we can make much more scientific relevance as well to some of these stories which you were telling. And it's really an honor to hear from you. And the way you were telling this story, you were actually flowing just like water. And that was the beauty of your presentation as well. What we are going to do is open the floor for Q&A. And if there are questions in the chat box, we will take them up. Usually, we encourage our participants to switch on their camera and be with us when you ask the question. Maybe we can first start with Steve Lockett, who was the first person to put something on the chat box. And then we can take as per our chat box information. And request everyone to please put their comments and questions in the chat box so that we also have an order for Q&A. Thank you so much. Over to you, Steve.
Yes, thank you so much, Devdutt. That
Right.
was a fantastic presentation. So I was just interested in river morphology. So in particular across Trans-Himalaya, for example, we know that Yamuna shifted to join Ganga at some time in the far history, and in fairly recent history, for example, Teesta shifted from Ganga to Brahmaputra. We know just how far Kosi has shifted across Bihar, etc. So is this idea of the river morphology, the movement of rivers, is it represented through mythology? And if so, how?
So you have stories of, for example, in the Ganga following the Rishi Jahnu. She follows him wherever he goes. She follows. That's why she's called Jahnavi, one of the names given to her. So this whole idea of following wherever these people went. So this idea of a river following people, but actually it might be people following where the river goes. One doesn't really know whether it's the shifting of the rivers, but a major folklore narrative refers to rivers of the monsoon. India has many temporary rivers which appear only during the monsoon season. And if one goes to places like Goa, you hear folk songs of lovers being separated by rivers. And this whole idea of I miss my lover because you must have gone to meet or he must have gone across and then the river comes along and suddenly you have a river separating you. So the idea of the river separating the lovers and the Chandani, this whole idea of a male and the female bird on either sides because one moved away hoping to come back and then the river forms and they have to wait till the river dries up till they meet and they keep crying to each other is a very poetic metaphor that is there in India. Many people don't know about these rivers which are across India. They keep appearing. One of the reasons why during the rainy season people did not travel Chaturmas because suddenly flash floods would take place. So flash floods, shifting rivers, moving rivers is a recurring theme. Exactly whether it refers to these specific movements of these rivers, I don't know, because this would have happened over hundreds of years and we know it because we have geosatellite images and all that kind of things, but a person who's living in the river, he may not notice this happening. Like many people in Bengal do not realize that most of Bangladesh emerged only in the last 300-400 years. They were mostly forest hilly tribes. The agricultural lands which are there in Bangladesh are barely 500 years old. In Indian history, 500 is not a big deal. I mean, America didn't exist 500 years ago. But the rivers, the whole shifting of rivers as an idea, or that the Punjab area becomes agricultural much later. These are ideas that we know now, but I don't think people who lived at that time would have been aware of this shifting, the Brahmaputra shifting. I'm not sure, unless it was a rapid occurrence. As I said, the flash flood is something that they would remember. You wouldn't know a disappearing river either. At most, you'll say grandfather saw a river. great-grandfather saw a river, but father didn't see a river, and I know the river only by digging it. So I know there is a river. Like when you go to the river Gaya, in the Gaya region, when you dig, the water is under the ground. And there are many stories about how the water is cursed by the goddess to be under the ground. And so you have to search for the river in Gaya. So there is a notion of shifting, but not exactly, the technical things.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Thank you.
in time. Daniel.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Devdutt. Maybe we invite Apurva Ojha sir, and he was the first person to come as a Meet a Maestro for 300 sessions. So, Apurva Ojha sir,
Uh,
are you around?
yeah, I'm there.
Go ahead, sir. Yeah.
Very, very, very fascinating talk.
Yes.
Truly fascinating. So I was just thinking that while we have a rain god, while we have rivers, specific rivers who are goddesses, do we have any mythology around water, which is, I know, more generic than rain or river or something like that, or the sea? Do we have any mythology or any goddess around water as an element? Like we have, for example, wind as an element, we have very clear, Hanuman is there, etc. So are there any?
The thing is, the rivers are seen as daughters of the ocean. So this gender also has to be played a role. So this ocean is male. So Varuna, Sagara is
Hmm.
male. Then the rivers are female. So the father and the daughter, and the connection between the father is the salt water, which gives and doesn't ask anything. So we consider the symbol of generosity, because the sea doesn't ask anything, but it'll give you fish, it'll give you pearls, it'll give you salt, but it will not ask anything. Unlike a land, which you have to till the soil to get something. So it becomes a symbol of generosity. His daughters are these rivers which flow into him. So this idea of snow, Himalaya, is also male. So the snow god is also male. So you see Himalaya as male. The sea, as I said, the Buddhist literature, there is a goddess called Mani Meghalaya, which the merchants worship, but we don't know much about that. But we don't. So the water is not seen as a single entity. There is salt water, there is fresh water, there's stagnant water, there's flowing water. Every river body is controlled. Stagnant water is not considered uh, uh, is more linked with yakshas. Flowing water is linked with nagas. So you have these different entities linked. I have never seen water being seen which is very different from wind. But even in wind, if you look very carefully, the different types of winds have different names. So Hanuman comes from Maruta, which is the stormy wind. Vayu is the gentle wind. So Vayu, Samira, Maruta. So everything is divided by different forms. The sun has different forms. The early morning sun is different. The sun in the noon is different. Sun at sunset is different. So there are 12 names given to the sun. So there is no one sun actually. There are different suns at different times. So we must see it from the point of view of the people who compose these ideas.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, I can keep on listening to his wonderful stories, but let's move on. Devapam Das, would you please elaborate your question? Wonderful, simple question. Go ahead.
Yes,
And if there are youth in the group, I would also encourage youth to also engage. Over to
yes,
you,
yes.
Devapam. Yeah.
Um,
Go
hello,
ahead.
Achi.
We can
can
hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
hello, Devdutt sir. I am one of your very much fan. I have lots of books written by you. So my question is, in Rig Veda, rivers are called the daughters of Indra.
Hmm.
Why? And the second, okay. Can one question or I can say
Ask the next
another
question.
one?
If it's related, I'll put it together. Just ask.
Oh,
Just ask.
he has a wish
Yes,
list and he
another,
says, Narmada's
another.
story, please. How
Okay.
sweet.
Another one is about lakes. You today talks about sea, rain, and rivers, but not about lakes. I wanted to listen
Got it.
about lakes.
Lakes. So, remember in the Rig Veda, they are not much familiar with the sea. The word Samudra does appear. There is awareness of the sea, but it is not they're not intimately linked to the sea. They're traveling. They are familiar. They have seen they're traveling to along rivers, and rivers are linked with Indra, because when Indra, there's a fight between Indra and Vritra, the rains fall, the snowstorm happens, and the rivers start to flow. So rivers are therefore linked to the rain god, and therefore linked with storms and seas. A river, sorry, with rain. So it's the rain water that they're talking about, therefore the father. The stories have to be seen, as I said, metaphorically and not literally. Later period, the rivers have shifted attention from Indra to Varuna. So Varuna takes over, and Indra doesn't take over. Indra sort of becomes more with the rain, and Varuna becomes more. Even the way we see, Indra is on the eastern side, and Varuna is on the western side behind you. So you find this link. As far as lakes are concerned, remember the land which is called Kurukshetra is considered to be the land of 5 lakes. So 5 lakes which were filled with the blood of Kshatriyas, which were produced by Parshuram. When Parshuram killed the Kshatriyas, he filled 5 lakes with blood, and that is the region of the of Kurukshetra region. So it is a very gory story, but it is linked with But you have many of these stories across. Like Bombay has a place called a tank called Bana Ganga, where Ram is supposed to have shot an arrow from where water came. So I think whenever they would dig deep and water would come from bottom, they would always say the hero has released the water through shooting an arrow. So Arjun releases such waters, Ram releases such waters. So these are linked with the links, the never ending lakes which are always flowing. So the step wells are linked to these. So across India, you have step wells, which is a very unique structure, which is found in Deccan region, in Rajasthan, in Gujarat, in Maharashtra. And these are all linked with yakshas. The guardians of these places are yakshas, but they're very dangerous. If you go down, 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 it's a very scary place, and they're supposed to be the yakshas. So all ponds,
Just like
and you have the
just
story of the Yaksha
just
Prashna.
like Bhima said, fetches lotuses from pond of or
Yakshas.
lakes of Jakstas.
And
Thank you.
they're linked with water fowl, storks. So waterfowl. Remember I told you about waterfowl. So yeah.
That is Prabha's cave. From that water fowls came and monkeys. And someday ago I read Sita. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. We will encourage more young people to also engage in these conversations.
May I
I,
speak now?
recall my own younger time when these stories used to come with our grandparents and, even with villagers where I was living in West Bengal. Maybe we move on to next question. We have Sandeep Pulka, no, Vaishali Kasture. Are you still around, Vaishali? Please elaborate.
Yes, yes, I'm
Go
here.
ahead.
First of all, thank you, Mansi, for organizing this, and thank you, Devdutt sir, for merely existing. Seriously, like your books, your talks are so like it helps. Sometimes it helps in existential crisis. Also, like when you have existential crisis and when you just go and read something written by you, it absolutely helps. So it's an honor here to be asking this question to you directly. Um, so my question is not exactly related. It is related to Ganpati's birth, but not water per se. I don't wish to hurt anybody's
Yeah,
sentiments.
yeah, no problem.
Uh, but when I was telling the story of Ganpati's birth to my daughter, there were a lot of questions. She's 5 years old, and there were a lot of questions which arose from her. Okay,
Hmm.
and which I never questioned. So questions like, but when Shiva cut the little boy's head, didn't he do anything wrong? And now
Hmm.
to replace that head, he cut another like Gajapati's head, and didn't he do anything wrong
Hmm.
over there? And things like that. And I like really don't know how to answer these questions to her. So any
I'll give you the answer. I'll tell you the two ways to answer. One is when you grow up, you find out all answers are not with parents. So now that is a
Yes.
great opportunity for them to encourage them to read books. He said, why don't you find out for yourself and tell me the answer, and give her 6 books to read. And that's a very
Absolutely.
clever way. You are not obliged as a parent to answer all questions. Please
Yeah.
remove, that is a very wrong idea which people have given to children, that parents have the answers. Parents do not have the answers. Teachers don't have the answers. They have to read themselves. They have to do their own reading, and otherwise they become lazy. So step one is, please do not carry the
Very
burden
well put.
of answering, because that is a very wrong thing, which is a pedagogy which has for some weird reason spread, and that is not healthy at all. Step one. Step two, I think it's a great opportunity to teach children that life feeds on life. Whenever you eat something, you have killed something. There is no escape from it. So the famous story from Persian literature and Islamic mythology is of that Bakra Eid, that God tells Abraham that sacrifice your favorite son to me. And Abraham can't believe God has asked him to sacrifice his own son. And just when he's about to cut the neck of his son, a goat appears. And God says, okay, kill the goat. And what we are being told is that in the desert, you will die of starvation unless you cut the goat and eat the goat, because you cannot, there are no plants in the desert. The goat transforms the plant protein into flesh protein or animal protein, which you can eat. And therefore the act of killing, in Sanskrit it's called jivo jivatsya jeemahi. So this whole idea that life needs life, and stories like mythology are always very violent. If you read even fairy tales, Hansel and Gretel, they'll always be violent. Modern parenting and modern, especially American influence, is very bad, because we genuinely believe food comes from air. It comes magically. All food is produced through violence. All consumption is the result of violence. We kill people. Like a tree is killed to produce wood. So all your furniture is the dead body of plants. So when you start explaining this, now the killing of a boy, and so now you killed him, you have to replace him, one more animal has to die. So you cannot
Okay.
revive the child without killing another life, or you live with a dead child. So you decide what you want. You can starve to death. Oh, I don't want to hurt any animal. So the Jains were very clear. You want to hurt nobody, starve to death. So this
Very
idea,
well put.
it's a very false idea that, people think vegetarian, and this is what is called, we don't want to kill living creatures. So scientists say plants don't have feelings, animals don't have feelings, you can eat them. Which is, in Hindu mythology, it is very clear. The moment you eat something, you have killed something. Therefore, consumption economy is a violent economy. Therefore, we fast. That is why there's Ramzan. That is why there's Lent. That is why there's Ekadashi, to remind you that on that one day at least nobody is going to die. So that is a great opportunity to teach your child the price of consumption. That our life is based, and it's a very brutal, but you see, ancients were very honest. They were not lying to their children. Modern society lies to their children. We lie. We don't tell how many animals, plants, humans suffer so that we can live a comfortable life. And that is why we should not overindulge. We should not be over consuming. We should live a simple life. Not because it is a good thing. It is because you don't want to kill more elephants.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So we have
I
to
think
understand. Sorry,
sorry.
this is a very important question you have asked, because I see parents trying to hide, and especially in our countries like India, where we
Yes.
talk about this nonsense about vegetarian thing. You eat what you want. Even if you eat a plant, you're going to kill somebody. That you cannot escape the idea of killing. That is why all our gods have weapons in their hands. You will kill. And that is important to remember. That's why when you build a dam, you're going to kill hundreds and thousands of animals. You're going to kill hundreds, and a dam will destroy things. You'll say, oh, I'll not break a dam. But then people will, some other problem will happen. Humans will not have food. So you have to, the violence against Yamuna, the violence against Ganga, the violence. So all stories are based on violence because they're related to consumption. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you. And I think a most important lesson I got from you is that we have to encourage children to learn, and also parents and teachers. We should not really take all the burden of having answers to everything. Let's move on. Sandeep Kulkarni, very interesting question and also I think the closing question from my end will be very much similar to that. Go ahead, Sandeep. Are you still around?
Yeah, ma'am.
Go
Good
ahead.
evening to all, and I'm thankful for organizing this session. And Devduttji, I'm not just your fan. I would say I'm a devotee. And I had been. I'm a faculty in Somaya College. You had been there for several occasions. And there are many questions to ask, but then I will restrict to only one. Uh, that is how this mythology business can be linked with the scientific understanding of today's world. With a question like, when we say Kashyap Maharishi and then his wives, and from then comes all the Nagas, the gods, etc.,
Yeah.
like that. But when we talk about evolutionary thing, then when Kashyap was human being, before human being, everything existed. And when we say Kashyap was, say, some organism when evolution of life took place, so then
Yes.
of course these things can be explainable.
Mhm.
Now, exactly how do we place Kashyap or any other thing when we say start or end of universe?
Good question. Excellent question. So step one, we should be careful of how, the world today, we talk about globalization. What is globalization? Globalization is actually westernization. We are shaped by Western ideas. And what is the unique feature of Western ideas? There's only one truth. Only one truth. So originally they used religious truth, like Jesus is the truth, Muhammad is the truth, Moses is the truth. There's one truth only one truth. Then they replaced religious truth with scientific truth. So even today, if I were to review some of the questions, when Mansee made a comment, we think science is superior, somehow superior. So let us see what science cannot answer. Science cannot answer anything related to human emotions. Because science is based on measurement. Science is based on mathematics. Measurement and mathematics are critical for anything scientific. Without a measurement, without mathematics, there is no science. Now, the only thing science cannot measure is emotions.
Yes.
And therefore, emotions are outside the scientific world. And therefore, no scientist is an expert in, like I always tell people, can you measure jealousy? Can you measure, so if you cannot measure jealousy, you can't regulate jealousy.
Even you cannot measure love. How much
Yeah.
love?
So how do you solve problems if you cannot measure those things which really cause problems? So Elon Musk, however brilliant he is, can never ever measure jealousy or mathematically control jealousy, and therefore world's problems cannot be solved through science because it cannot handle jealousy. So remember this, there is a shortcoming of science. We don't and nobody talks about it because science is very clever, and the Western mind does this. It only talks about problems it can solve. It never talks about problems it cannot solve. Right. So keeping that in mind, now with this, let's look at the story of Kashyapa Muni. What are they trying to communicate? Go into the minds of people. They are trying to say all living creatures have something in common and something different. So how am I connected to the snake? How am I connected to the eagle? So we'll say every one of us has a common father, but we have different mothers. So Vinita gives birth to all the birds. Kadru gives birth to all the snakes. So there is diversity in the world because of different mothers. Yoni. अलग अलग योनि से लेकिन एक ही शुक्राणु. So we are all linked to each other. Now, what are the implications of this? We all have a common father. You have the same father as the snake, the eagle, the Rakshasas, the Yakshas, every creature that you see around you. You are standing around a tree. That tree is your half brother. तुम्हारा सौतेला भाई है. Now, both you and he because you all have a common father, his property and your belongs to you, right? And it belongs to the tree also because you all have to inherit your father's property. But who gets the bigger share? You will fight with the tree. You will kill the tree to make your life better. You kill your own brother to make your life better. So you are being told, remember this famous line, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It means we are children of the same father but different mothers. So see Ramayana, see Mahabharat, the same father, different mothers. Dashrath has different, how they behave with each other. Same story is with Vali and Sugriv, same father, different mothers. So there'll always be this one common, one uncommon, one common, one. The same story with Kubera and Ravana. So this, and so who are you fighting? You're fighting your own brother over property. And that is the bottom line of human, of life. Now, this is how Indian story. No, you don't take it literally. As I said, mythology is symbolic. Mythology is metaphorical. They are trying to explain the human need to grab property, which science cannot explain, which is an emotion. Why do you have right to the land and not the tree? Because you're going to cut the tree to build your building. How do you explain this? Because you are both Vasudeva Kutumbakam, same father, different mothers, but you have the bal, you have the power to cut the tree and take the land because you want to build your house. So you have killed a life and now you have to justify it. So that is the moral crisis of the Bhagavad Gita. How can I kill my own relatives for my life? So that is how the story. So you have to connect all this. Now this is not, science cannot explain this because it deals with I mean, if I were to simplify it, if you're hungry, you want food. Food is what science focuses on. Mythology focuses on hunger. Got it? That's the difference. So food and hunger. Food is measurable, saguna, and therefore scientific. Hunger is nirguna. You can't see it, you can't measure it. It is the realm of mythology.
Wonderful. I mean, Parinita, are you still around? Please pose your question a little bit elaborate, and also if you can be very focused question. Thank you. Interesting question. And I see some
Hi,
people have
Devdutt.
asked questions for this story, that story, so Narmada story. I want to hear more stories about rivers. Go ahead, Parinita. Yeah.
Hi, Devdutt. Thank you so much. I've seldom seen such clarity with mythology. It's really wonderful. It's very heartening. We've been working on protecting parts of a river and trying to integrate ecosystem conservation with mythology because we need stories, and it's only stories which can bring people together to work together on something. We have lots of reports and scientific facts, but somehow they don't get people together like stories do. And we have so much stories. And some of the stories that we are using is Sati Asra, the Seven Sisters, because all of the Sati Asras in Maharashtra, they are congregated on extremely ecologically important spaces
Yes.
like confluences, like deep pools with fish, like riverine banks. It's very beautiful. So we want to somehow include that into conservation. Now, what I wanted to ask was, what is the real story behind the Seven Sisters? Because we know it's not possibly not Saptamatrikas, it's a very local understanding of rivers linked to the land. So can you please tell us more about it? Thanks.
So, the problem with this word is, I suspect it is Sati Apsara. Sati, seven. Sati, not Sati. But Sati is because it has different connotations. Sati, Apsara, but there are 7 stones usually kept. Now, Apsara because water. Apsa is water. So river water. So ask yourself, originally people would always need an access to water in order to survive. So when you travel, India is connected by people who would travel from one water body to another water body. So the whole Tirtha Yatra is journey from one river point to the other, wherever there is water. Otherwise, you will die of thirst. You can carry food with you, but how much water can you carry? You cannot carry. I mean, now we have these plastic bottles, but still, water is the most important thing that you need to carry to survive. The second thing you need to survive is fire. But given a choice between fire and water, you in India, in a cold country, it's very different. So Prometheus, when you hear the story, the fire plays a very important role. But you will see early Indian stories, Vedic stories are fire-based, but later stories are water-based because they have moved to India. So it's a very different ecosystem. Fire is very important in Central Asia and all that, water was not a big deal. It's not. It's relatively easy to find water in the mountains, streams, and all that kind of things. But India becomes water is the tirtha, the whole garland of going from. So that's important. Now, when you go to a river point, this is where life happens. So Apsara, you're seeing these Apsara, and Apsaras are very considered to be very dangerous because rivers are dangerous. I can suddenly, I think the river is shallow, and I'll suddenly fall into a deep pool and die. So water is very dangerous, and also shifting rivers, which I mentioned in an earlier question. Rains are causing shifting rivers. I'll give you a little thing about water, by the way. Cows don't like wet soil. Cows don't like wet soil, and it's something that zoologists have. A friend of mine pointed it out. They don't like to walk on wet soil because they can slip and fall. They like drier lands, jangala. So during Chaturmas, the cows would not move. That is why Chaturmas as a concept becomes important. Don't move, don't move, don't move at that time, because rivers suddenly appear out of nowhere and wash away villages. Suddenly flash floods will happen. Cows are terrified because they will slip and fall. Therefore, in Goa especially, my friend pointed out, during the rainy season, you find all these cows coming to the main road and standing on the road because that is dry land. They cannot handle wetland. It also, I think, infects their hooves and they don't like it. Horses don't like wetlands. Horses hate. One of the reasons why horses can't be bred in India is because of this rains and the marshiness of the soil. It causes bacterial infection on their hooves. Buffaloes love water. So, what do you offer the Sati Asara in offering? You offer a male buffalo, which has young male buffalo before it has reached puberty. That is the great offering. These are the potraj that you offer. So that's what you offer to the Sati Asara. So these are the original tribal Hindu deities. So when you see the Sapta Matrika, it is the Brahmins have adopted this and made it. It is much later. The local community will worship. I mean, you have to look at you have to see the ecosystem. You are having a conversation with the ecosystem because your survival depends on the ecosystem. And therefore, these gods, so Kali is the wild ecosystem and Gauri is the domesticated. So wild, well, let's say you come to a jungle that's Kali, uncontrollable, scary, and you are like, okay, can I control her? Can I turn her into a field? Can I get fruits from her? Do I know her? Can I control her? Once I control her, she becomes Gauri. So Kali is my mother, Gauri is my daughter. So that is poetry. Now it's not incest, which people will have, oh, literal, scientific mind will turn this into incest. But the mythological mind will understand the poetry. Ki my mother is my daughter. When I can't understand her, but I need her, she's Kali. And then she becomes. So these stories, the Sati Asara, come from this wild space. Of this wild. Now, why 7 is a difficult, because you have the 7 notes in the music and you have the 7 colors of the rainbow. I mean, one of the theses is there is some reason we saw 7 as connected with nature because of this. Because Sare Gama Padhani Sa. So you come back to the circle. So summer means coming back to Sa. So Sa Re Ga Ma Pa Dha Ni Sa. Sam karna. So Samaveda. You come back to the origin. So 7 marks the journey back to the origin. The circularity of life. So Sati Asara. The 7. I mean, this is, as I said, mythology is not exact. It's not science. It is metaphor. The more you know, the more you connect. So you have to find it like this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I know you have a call at 6:30, but I cannot hold myself to ask at least one minimum question. And my question is very generic as a water educator, because as you rightly put, science does not have answers to everything, and science is only asking questions that it can answer. And we also see the genesis or basis of any research is something where we know what we are going to find. I want to understand from you, if we can use these tools. I mean, I'm saying mythology as tool in a society today, where we can really convince or make people aware and awakened about the rising water crisis, about the need for water conservation, because science has not been so successful, technology has not been so successful to move people to change in behavior. So I would like to see your point of view on a convergence of this kind of knowledge to the scientific knowledge, so that we can have better material for people to be convinced. We love Shiva because there is Ganga coming out of it and things like that. Where do you see we can bring a convergence to both these knowledge systems?
I think it is first knowing who to talk to and
Yes.
helping people understand. A politician is obsessed with votes. He
Mm,
doesn't care about knowledge. He only wants votes. And there's nothing else that interests. I've worked with a lot of politicians. They're quite stupid people, but they have power. So you
mm,
have to talk to them. You have no choice but to talk to them. I always tell them, if you didn't have power, I wouldn't talk to you. So I'm only
mhm.
talking to you because you have power, not because, and I hope that behind this power is an intelligent person. But I can't see intelligence. I can only see power. So I'm very upfront with this. So you should always be very clear who you talk to and why you talk to them. Also, the next generation of children have to be educated. I think scientific thinking is a problem because it, as I said, it focuses on the food. It doesn't talk about hunger. And I think we should start talking about hunger. And it's important to understand that India is the only land where the concept of consequences is very important, karma. In Western thought, ask yourself, when industrialization happened, why did nobody bother with pollution?
Yeah.
It's very simple. In the Bible, God gives man dominion over land to do as he pleases. This is a very important idea that nature does not is we can do whatever we want with nature. It will
We can
manage.
appropriate. Mm,
But in most non-industrial cultures, nature was considered to be a person and it was imagined as a woman. So when you read the Bhagavata, look at the first story, and you don't find the story anywhere in the world, by the way. The story is that she comes in the form of a cow and looks at Vishnu and says, the kings of the earth are breaking my back. Get rid of
wow.
them. And then Ram and Krishna come as a consequence to get the rid of the earth. That means the greedy people, not unrighteous people. That's a very wrong word. It's greedy people. We don't call people greedy nowadays. We call them ambitious.
Mm,
Ambition is a good word. But what is an ambitious person? He's a greedy person. And the moment you see greed, again, you can't measure it. Can you say Elon Musk is greedy? You can't. There's no mathematical measure. There's no way to prove it. How do you prove it? He'll say, no, I'm not ambitious. I'm ambitious. I'm not greedy. So we have become greedy people, and the earth. So this whole idea of this Gau Mata is not really cow. It is the earth who's crying to Vishnu and saying, I am being abused by the people on earth. So okay, reduce my burden because they're not listening to me. And read the story of Prithu, which is there in the Bhagavata Puran, of how Vena, the king who abuses the earth, is killed, and his son Prithu is brought to create a balance, an ecological balance. And this story is not found in any other mythology in the world. And I think it's important to understand that, not because of Mera Bharat Mahan, because most of the people are talking about Hindutva and Hindu, they don't understand the cow is a symbol of earth. By taking care of cows, you're not saving the earth. It's the earth which needs saving. But then, as I said, politicians want votes. So we have to explain what these stories are trying to communicate. This is the wisdom of the ancestors. They're telling you. And this is how the stories are being told. So if you see the story of the Bhagavata and you see the Prithu story, that's why earth is called Prithvi. So anyway, that I can go on in
And you,
questions. So
I can keep on asking you questions. So stories of there are some questions which are still left, but I'm sorry to all the participants that we cannot take all the questions. I know you have to leave, but before I say you goodbye and thank you, I also want to wish New Year wishes to all the participants, and also send them a deep gratitude for continuing to support us in this conversation series. As I said, we have already crossed 300 plus sessions, 320 to be precise, in December. And now every year we do a water festival, and we are going to Mahakumbh to have our Jal Akhada on 31st of December and 1st of February. And this year we are talking about Behne Do, Kehne Do. So we are really going to reach out to people to learn about their idea about water. As we heard, Devdutt's ideas about water and systems around civilizations. It was so wonderful to hear you out. I can actually hear you endlessly, to be honest, and so are the other participants. But thank you so much for your patiently listening to all the questions and answering. And thanks a lot for taking out time for us. And an apology for this delay. We can't help, but we have to take all the questions as much as possible. Thanks a lot, all of you, once again. January, we are not doing many sessions. We are only having special sessions as we are preparing for the water festival, which we usually take a month off. And then we will restart with our regular Monday, Friday, and Wednesday session. Do keep checking our website, www.w4w.in, for regular updates. But as I said, we will start somewhere mid-February after the water festival and take a small break to prepare for the water. Do join us at Mahakumbh if you are there, and look for our stall. We just got our stall location today. Thank you so much, all of you. Please take care. Thanks, Devdutt, once again for your time. And thank you, Anand, for coordinating all the, between me and Devdutt, for all the efforts which has went behind. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.